everyone, Julian here, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to make darker, more raw techno. Now, as usual, you can get the project file and samples from this video in the description, so make sure to check that out. And yeah, let's dive in. So, the first thing I have going on here is this kick, which sounds like this. And so, I made this using two layers. The first one is this sort of like bass layer, and then we have like a punch layer. So the way I made the bass layer is I started with this impact. So like just kind of like a softer sort of cinematic kind of impact. I really like using these for these kicks. You can see when we put it through the processing that I'm going to show you in a second, it really turns into like a nice textured kind of bass, which is what you want for this style. So like I said, I put that impact into a simpler. And what I did was, first I actually messed with the amplitude envelope. So you can see I just turned the sustain all the way down, turned the decay down a bit, and just made it a bit shorter. And then after that, you can hear I put it through a low pass filter. So this just cuts out a lot of that high end. It makes it more bass focused. You can already hear it's like more subby. So yeah, and then after that, I have that going into, I turn on the filter envelope, excuse me. So you can hear that just kind of helps with that, like, this sort of hit at the start of it. But still keeps it tight and mostly low-end focused for the ending of the sound, I guess. And then after that, I have it going into this pitch envelope. So here's without the pitch envelope. And then with, you can hear it just adds a bit of like punch at the start of the sound. So this is a great way to do this. Like I said, if you put it through the pitch envelope, I put the amount at 24 semitones, and I gave it a very short decay, so it's just like a quick hit. After that, what I did, and I'll turn these things off, is I put it through a few different effects. So the first one was I put it through this utility, where I converted it to mono. Because since this is mostly the like low end of the sound, and really most of the low end in the track is coming from this layer, I wanted to just convert it to mono since you don't really want your bass to be in stereo. So yeah, then after that I have this going into the saturator, which I use the drive very minimally, but I use the wave shaper quite a bit. If you don't know, the wave shaper is one of the color modes on Ableton Saturator, and it's very similar to FM synthesis where you kind of are just going in and like, you know, sort of changing the waveform of your sound and sort of shaping it more how you want it to be. So yeah, you can hear that just kind of helps with like giving it a bit more texture and giving it more of like an interesting vibe. And then after that, I kind of slammed it into this limiter, which I'm going to have to turn this back down for, but that makes it sound like this. So this is a technique that I think is really underrated with making these kind of kicks, is just putting like one of these kind of sounds into a limiter that obviously you turn the gain way up. I know a lot of people would probably say this is the absolute wrong way to do it, but what this does, and the reason why I like doing it, is you can hear it just kind of blows everything out. Like it's really just sort of doing kind of like compression, where it's just sort of helping to flatten out the waveform, and it just makes it like a nice, really solid bass sound. And it gives it like that interesting kind of like techno like vibe as well, where it's not quite, you know, like the hardest hitting thing in the world, but it has a really nice impact to it that feels really organic. So then after that, like I said, I have this punchy layer, which is just that kind of kick. It sounded like this. And then I put it through this EQ8 where I cut out the low end and cut out some high end as well, just to sort of fit it with this vibe a little bit more. The thing with the high end is that like it really just wouldn't have fit with this kind of kick, since this is like darker, more industrial techno. It wouldn't the high end just sounds kind of weird for this, so I cut that out. And yeah, then all I did on the group here is I just had this EQ8 where I boosted some high end and I boosted some low end. Pretty straightforward. So the next thing I have going on are these hi-hats, which sound like this. So the first one is this. Just like a simple close hi-hat, a bit of a high pass on there. And then we have the open one, which I made with operator, which sounds like this. And so the way I made this was I took white noise, and you can see and hear I set the envelope, or the amplitude envelope, like that. And then I have that going into this bandpass filter. which is set like that, and it just sort of gives you, it sort of shapes the sound. The thing I like about making hi-hats, and especially open hi-hats, this way, is you have so much control, like between the amplitude envelope and then the bandpass filter. Like if I start turning these knobs, you see, like, we can have a totally different hi-hat in seconds, and it's all just from playing around with these simple controls. So I really like making hi-hats this way, especially for techno, where it's so, like, organic and, like, also a lot of layers are kind of synthesized. I think it's a really nice way to do it. So yeah, so I did that. And then the next thing that I have here are these two noise samples, which sound like this. So, pretty straightforward. I just layered some cassette noise and some vinyl noise together. They're very quiet, I know, but they're just kind of in the background. And then I have on both of them a high pass, as well as I have them both sidechained to the kick. And the reason why I have these sidechained is because, like, these are very important with this style of techno. But the thing is, if you don't sidechain them, and I'll play them in the mix and you may be able to hear it a bit. Yeah, so when you don't sidechain them, what happens is they kind of just sit over top of everything, and in my opinion, they kind of distract you from, like, the groove and what's going on with the track, because you become kind of focused on just hearing those two layers. So I like to sidechain them, and I hear this a lot in, like, Surgeon and Perks tracks, because it just kind of makes them fit with the groove, and it keeps them, like, just sort of grounded, and sort of helps to put them in the world of this track. Now, one thing I will note also, with all the sidechaining here, is I only sidechain them to this layer of the kick, because if I sidechain them to the whole group, or even just this layer, the problem is that this layer is so long and, like, drawn out that it's not really going to be very dynamic. When you sidechain them, it's going to just kind of be, like, holding them down. Whereas this layer, it's such a quick little impact / like punch or whatever you want to call it, that it made just more sense to sidechain everything to just that. So yeah, so the next layer I have here is this little chord pad thing, which sounds like this. And so the way that I made this is basically, it's just one saw wave in analog. I have that going into a low pass filter. The frequency is set to 420. Interesting. And then I have that going into the amplitude envelope, which is set this way. So no, like, the sustain and decay pretty much all the way up. And then I have no release and no attack. So it just allows it to be, like, just sort of a long held out note, which is what I want, because obviously this is playing over 8 bars. And then after that, I have it going into some vibrato and some unison here. So those just kind of help to give it a more, like, organic, kind of, like, interesting analog vibe. And yeah, then after that, I have it going into this chorus, so it's just adding a bit of stereo width and beefing up the sound a little bit more. After that, I have an auto pan. So it's just kind of panning it around, and the thing about this is that, like, since there are so many layers that are straight down the center with this track, I wanted to have something that was kind of moving around, because even though techno, they say to keep it, like, a lot in mono since it's going to be played in clubs, you can still have layers that, move around, and auto pan and do all that kind of stuff. So that's what this is doing. I just had this auto pan on here. The amount is set like that. And yeah, after that, I have this reverb and this other auto pan. The reason why I'm showing these together is because they kind of work together. So what I did here was basically I made this reverb that took the sound and made it really big and washed out and, like, long. But the thing is, it was still a little bit boring. So I added this auto pan with the noise waveform, and what this is doing, as you can hear, is sort of, like, randomly giving it this interesting texture. So this is a really cool way to give your sounds, like, a nice texture and, like, vibe, is doing this auto pan trick. I've done this in a few of my videos before. It's just good on these, like, really held out long chords like this, because again, it makes it not just like a simple saw wave with some chorus, and instead it's kind of like just adding a bit more interest and making it a little bit cooler. So after that, I just have it sidechain again to that punch layer of the kick, and then I have a low cut / high pass, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, that is that layer. So the last thing we have here is this brass stab, which sounds like this. So quite a few people have asked me how to make these, and the way that I made this one was basically I started with this sample, just like a pretty straightforward kind of regular brass stab, and then I pitched that down an octave, so it'd be a little bit deeper, so that sounded like this. And then after that, I added a low pass filter to sort of cut out the highs and make it like more low end. Like the thing is, you don't always want this to necessarily sound like a brass stab or like a horn or anything like that. You just want it to sort of take up that same space. So putting on this low pass filter, I felt like gave it more of an interesting vibe and made it less of just like, you know, a regular old horn stab and more of just like this kind of interesting low midsy kind of sound. So then after that, I have this reverb, which as you can hear is pretty essential for sounds like this, and you can even turn the K-time up a bit. But it just sort of washes it out and gives it more ambience, and yeah, makes it longer. And then I just sidechain into the kick. So that's really it. I mean, like I said, the main things to think about are like with the kick, making sure it's 2 layers, and trying this method for your sort of low end layer. The synthesized hi-hats, of course, are very, very popular, or very much a thing that I would recommend trying. And then sidechaining your noise layers, as well as like the cool chord synth and the brass stab. So that is going to be it for today, guys. Make sure to let me know what you think of this video in the comments, and make sure to like this video, as well as subscribe. Once again, you get the project file and samples from this video in the description. You can also check out all my social media in the description, so make sure to go follow me. And yeah, I will see you guys again tomorrow with another tutorial.